Nor was it sentimental psychic phenomena, telepathy, communion with the dead, or so on. It was a completely substantive, practical, palpable reality, a fact of life. Srila Prabhupada had given them personal service, and now they would continue that service. Prabhupada was still present through his instructions, and all the nectar of his direct association, all the nectar of Krishna consciousness that he had given and shared with them was still available. Service and separation for Prabhupada's disciples was undoubtedly a fact. Otherwise, now that they were without his personal presence, how were they able to sustain themselves in spiritual life? The fact that they could continue as before increased their feelings of devotion and even increased their serving capacity, meant that Srila Prabhupada were very much still with them. As Srila Prabhupada's last instruction was the lesson of how a human being should die, he now taught beyond dying how to practically implement the highest philosophical teaching of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, which was what? Service and separation. This realization gave the devotees great hope that Srila Prabhupada and the revolutionary life of Krishna consciousness he had brought with him were not finished upon his departure. Now, we should really stay awake. This is Prabhupada's disappearance day. At least we can show some respect for Srila Prabhupada. I expect it. Often when a great personality dies, his contribution collapses, but Srila Prabhupada's presence remained and expanded, sustaining his devotees' life. And he still is. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nikashipu terrorizes the universe. Text 21. Tasyogra Danda Samvigna Tasyogra Danda Samvigya Sarve Loka Sapalaka Sarve Loka Sapalaka Anyatra Labda Sharana Anyatra Labda Sharana Sharanam Yayur Achutam Sharanam Yayur Achutam Tasyogra Danda Samvigya Sarve Loka Sapalaka Anyatra Labda Sharana Sharanam Yayur Achutam Tasyogra Danda Samvigya Sarve Loka Sapalaka Anyatra Labda Sharana Sharanam Yayur Achutam Tasyogra Danda Samvigya Sarve Loka Sapalaka Anyatra Labda Sharana Sharanam Yayur Achutam. Please chant. Tasya, of him, Hiranyakashipu, Ugradanda, by the very fearful chastisement. Danda means rod, the rod of chastisement. Samvigya, disturbed. Sarve, all. Loka, the planets. Sapalaka, with their principal rulers. Anyatra, anywhere else. Alabda, not obtaining. Sharana, shelter. Sharanam, for shelter. Yayu, approached. Achutam, Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation: everyone, including the rulers of the various planets, was extremely distressed because of the severe punishment inflicted upon them by Hiranyakashipu. Fearful and disturbed, unable to find any other shelter, they at last surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu. Please repeat: everyone, including the rulers of the various planets, was extremely distressed because of the severe punishment inflicted upon them by Hiranyakashipu. Fearful and disturbed, unable to find any other shelter, they at last surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 5.29, Bhoktaram jagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suidam sarvabhutanam gervamam shantam bruchati. The sages, knowing me as the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities, the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attain peace from the pangs of material miseries. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is actually the best friend of everyone. In a condition of distress or misery, one wants to seek shelter of a well-wishing friend. The well-wishing friend of the perfect order is Lord Sri Krishna. Therefore, all the inhabitants of the various planets, being unable to find any other shelter, were obliged to seek shelter at the lotus feet of the Supreme Friend. If from the very beginning we seek shelter of the Supreme Friend, there will be no cause of danger. It is said that if a dog is swimming in the water and one wants to cross the ocean by catching hold of the dog's tail, certainly he is foolish. Similarly, if in distress one seeks shelter of a demigod, he is foolish, for his efforts will be fruitless. In all circumstances, one should seek shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then there will be no danger under any circumstances. Om Gyantamarandasya Gyananjana Shlakaya Chakshuram Latamina Tasmashi Gurave Namaha Makam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Lagati Garim Yatkipatamam Vande Shigrim Nintarnam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Everyone, including the rulers of the various planets, was extremely distressed because of the severe punishment inflicted upon them by Hiranyakashipu. Fearful and disturbed, unable to find any other shelter, they at last surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu. There's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita which is, does anyone remember it, where one finally surrenders to Vishnu? That's right. So after many births, one who's actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. And often the case is that we don't surrender unless we have no alternative. because we're used to kind of dealing with things in our own way. We take shelter in different ways in the material world. But here, the Lord's mercy is that Hiranyakashipu is actually the Lord's mercy, because this it gives an opportunity for even the topmost personalities in the universe to take shelter in Krishna. Because they've got such abilities, then sometimes they even forget. What to speak of us mere mortals? We forget on a daily basis, isn't it? Sometimes the way the devotees interact with each other, they're not behaving like devotees. We're behaving like karmis at times. So that's because we forget that we're actually practicing to be devotees. This sadhana bhakti is a practice of devotion service. And the practice is by practicing that practical application of devotional service, we can become purified, where the practice becomes a reality, where we become a devotee. So sometimes we take shelter in our lower nature, or sometimes we take shelter in our own solutions for problems. But ultimately, Krishna won't allow those to sustain, because Krishna wants us back, and he wants us to take shelter in him. And he's the only real benefactor. As mentioned in this verse, Bhaktaram Jagatapasam. So sometimes people, they have some wealth, they have some influence or whatever, and they may think that they're the benefactor or the well-wisher, but the only person that can really give benedictions is Krishna. Even the demigods, Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, whatever benedictions people are looking for through the demigods or through the ancestors or whatever is ultimately coming from him, because they can't provide anything. Just like the scientists, they might provide a baby in the test tube, but they couldn't provide it. If you just give them a test tube and say, okay, you don't get any ingredients from a living mother or father, you just have to figure it out yourself. So they can't. So similarly, even the demigods, they are empowered, and everything belongs to the Supreme Lord, Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. He's the Lord of all spiritual material worlds. Everything belongs to him. But he allows us all a certain quota, which we can be a little master of, because we have some desire to enjoy and control separately from Krishna. We want a taste of that. But in our endeavours to do so, we'll become frustrated, and we'll realise that Krishna is actually the only enjoyer and the only controller. And our enjoyment is when we align ourselves with Krishna. So we fight hard to keep that independence, to stay in the material world, but we're actually not doing ourselves any favours. And just at the end of the purport here, there's a nice analogy. Can anyone remember the analogy given in the purport? Something about a dog. Yeah. So this is called taking shelter of the tail of the dog. It's also given in other places. And Prabhupada explains that, so you maybe, say you're stranded in the ocean, say there's a shipwreck and you're in the ocean and you see there's a dog there also. Sometimes when you have some disaster, there's all sorts of people, and maybe if there's a dog on board, that'll be in the ocean, and there's debris everywhere. And then you may try to hold on to something. So if you think, well, that dog's swimming very nicely, let me just catch its tail and I'll also be okay. The dog turns around and bites you because it doesn't want to go down. You're going to drag it down. Taking shelter of the tail of the dog is taking shelter in the material world, which we think it's going to save us. We think it's going to give us something, some security, some pleasure, but it bites us because there's a price to pay for it. And in all circumstances, one should seek the shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then there will be no danger under any circumstances. So in the material world, there's a verse which describes the danger of the material world. Does anyone know that one? Padam, padam, yeah, advi padam natesham. So step after step in this material world, there's danger. Can anyone say that today surely they won't die? Or today surely they won't trip over and, have an accident? Just like our dear friend Jayananda Prabhu, he was minding his own business, doing his service, and then he got some injury. That happens, isn't it? Once I was up a ladder fixing something for the Sanktan van, I fell off and I got quite an injury which has been lasting for 20 years. So you don't know. There's danger at every step. But the bigger danger actually is just not to the physical, but to the spiritual. If we come across a philosophy, there's so many things which are so many bogus philosophies which people present because they don't want to surrender to Krishna, so they come up with some kind of alternative where we don't actually have to follow the process. The process is given here, just here in the last second last sentence. In all circumstances, one should seek shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So how do we do that? Yeah, that's something else. Don't need a guru, don't need prasad. We just chant. So what's the process of taking shelter of the Supreme Lord? Bhagavad Gita 4:34. How do we surrender unto Krishna? Yeah, follow his instruction, and that instruction is Tadvidi pranipatena pariprishnena sevaya upadikshanti te gyanam gyaninas tattvadarshanaha. Just try to learn the truth by approaching the spiritual master, inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. Self-realized, so can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. So this is the process. And Prabhupada, he's not going to write in the purport, that currently I'm the only spiritual master, so you should approach me. But he's saying we should take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But before that, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is stating how we do that. So we don't just take shelter directly of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, we wouldn't know that had it not been for Prabhupada explaining these things to us. We wouldn't know so many other devious philosophies like Mayavadism and voidism, etc. We wouldn't know that. We could easily have been caught up with these things, thinking that it was something to be obtained from it. But all these other things are spiritual suicide, taking shelter of the tail of the dog. And even if we're not careful, even as aspiring Vaishnavas, sometimes things come up which deviate us. So we should be very careful not to listen to anything which is going to deviate us from that true path. And this way we actually remain under the shelter of the Supreme Lord. So today being the disappearance day of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki, then I'd like to speak a little bit regarding that. We'll also have something tonight. So there's a poem by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So the spiritual master, he's not just somebody who comes, stays for a bit, says a few things, disappears, and everyone goes back to normal, or so-called normal. They forget about him, or some people might remember him. But actually, he's here carrying a message, just as the Supreme Lord descends to establish principles of religion, to establish the Yuga Dharma, etc. Then the Supreme Lord's devotee also has the same mission. And just as the Supreme Lord's appearance and activities, Janma Karma Chame Divyam, are considered transcendental, then also so are the pure devotees' activities. There's one glorification that one scholar wrote of Srila Prabhupada. Very interesting, because he wasn't a devotee, but from the scholastic point of view, he was understood the Vedic literatures. And having seen Srila Prabhupada's appearance and activities, his janma and his karma, Then he said that such a person, according to the Vedic literature, it only appears in very, very rare occasions with a specific mission, and they're known as the Shaktivesh avatar. Of course, Srila Prabhupada would probably, and Shishikun in his humility, then Prabhupada might deny that. But the Shaktivesh avatar means that someone, and he described that this is someone who's given a specific mission by the Lord to come and deliver a mission and then go back to the spiritual world. So this is the scholar's understanding, what to speak of the devotee's understanding. So on this subject, there was a poem written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur on the subject of the passing of Thakur Haridas. So you may have heard this before. He reasons ill who says that Vaishnavas die when thou art living still and sound. The Vaishnavas die to live, and living try to spread the holy life around. So someone who thinks that, a Vaishnava has come and gone, and in a moment we'll also speak about this. Sometimes we can lament on the departure of the Vaishnava. That's natural. That is mentioned that when the spiritual master departs, then one should cry like the queen cries for the absence and the death of the king. And Prabhupada explains that the queen is said to be like the disciple of the king. She's like the assistant, and she serves the king. So similarly, the disciple, when the spiritual master leaves, then he may feel that separation. But still, when thou art living still and sound, so the sound is the association we got through those vani, those instruction. And Kali Yuga is actually, we're so fortunate because of the technology. Sometimes it can be, as Jadavita Maharaj rightly calls it, weapons of mass distraction. We have Facebook, this, that, the next thing. But it doesn't have to be a weapon of mass distraction. They can actually be used in Krishna's service. This is something very unique, which Srila Prabhupada taught us, that sometimes when people want to give up the material world, they're frustrated, they want to give up possessions, etc., and it's a big thing for them to do that. And they may even go to India and just float around wearing a gamcha, living under a different tree every night. But the trees that they're living under belong to Krishna. And really, what are they renouncing? They didn't own it in the first place. But if we can actually see who owns it, then we don't have to renounce. We just have to renounce that false mentality that we are the proprietor and we use everything in Krishna's service. So Prabhupada gave us that. That's just one thing which Prabhupada gave us. I'm sure we could go around everybody, and we may do that later on today. So you can think between now and this evening's program, try to get some appreciation of what Prabhupada brought to your life, what he gave you, which you feel is substantial. Everybody has got various aspects of how they connected with Srila Prabhupada. None of us met Prabhupada that we know of, at least not in this lifetime. Maybe some of the younger ones might have met him in the previous, we don't know. But still, we don't feel as if we haven't connected with Srila Prabhupada. And why is that? How are we connected when we never actually met him? Through instruction, yeah. And all these different technologies, we were mentioning that. We have videos of Prabhupada, we have audios, we have books. So there's so much there where we can associate with Prabhupada as much as anybody. Almost. We may not be able to get to put questions to him, but most questions which we could ask have already been brought up. Although one Prabhupada disciple did write a song about the questions he wished he'd asked when Prabhupada was there. But what can you do? You know, the questions you would ask when you're 50-year-old would be different from the question you would ask when you're 20, especially if you don't know really much. But Prabhupada did say that everything's in the books, so we shouldn't think we have to go anywhere else. We're looking for something, read Prabhupada's books. If you don't find it, continue reading them and pray. because these books are alive. Have you ever found there's something on your mind and perhaps you're even praying for it, or stressing over it or whatever, and you open one of the books and it just like leaps out at you? Did anybody ever find that? Yeah. And even I must say that even before I joined the temple, when I first got Bhagavad Gita, there's a couple of pages just leapt right out at me, and I thought, I've not even started this process, and Krishna's just like saying, this is what you're looking for. This is exactly what's in your mind, and I'm telling you exactly what your next step is. So for sincere, then Krishna will show us, we just have to pray. So the Vaishnavas die to live, and living try to spread the holy life around. And spreading the holy life around begins with spreading the holy name around. So when the Vaishnava dies, he doesn't die. He dies to live that eternal life, which he's been speaking about. Prabhupada came to remind us, as he says, what you've all forgotten, that we have an eternal relationship with God, with Krishna. And while they're here, they spend their time. Prabhupada often would emphasize, don't waste time. There's even one devotee, Krishna Prema, a very accomplished professional musician, and he put together some songs, and he would just use Prabhupada's words. He would quote them in. He would drop into the song, and there was one song where he just used Prabhupada saying, don't waste time. And there'd various quotes like that, just emphasizing that message. Because we cannot buy it back. Sometimes we might think we've achieved some great wealth if we win the lottery, especially if we don't even buy a ticket. Somehow or another, you come across some great fortune materially. But with all that great fortune, we cannot buy back one moment. I remember Hridayananda Maharaj giving a lecture, and he says, when the big materialist is lying on his deathbed, even if he tries to get, at that time, it was Queen Elizabeth and the Royal Navy to come and protect him, there's nothing anyone can do. You can't get back a moment. And at that time, we regret that we wasted our moments. So therefore, it's very important that we try to be attentive when we're discussing these matters, so we can become Krishna conscious throughout our life and naturally be Krishna conscious at the time of death. And the nature of the pure devotee, why is he coming to this material world? Why is he spending his time trying to spread the holy life, trying to spread the holy name, etc., and going through much pains to try to instruct us all how we can become a devotee? Why? Because he's compassionate. So every day we chant this verse, Vancha kalpa tribhyascha kripasindhibhyo cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. And normally when someone says that verse and everybody joins in, it's just like when we chant Hare Krishna mantra, everybody chants it, right? We don't just sit there like, mute. We chant, we join in chanting. And basically this is meaning that the devotee is a Vaishnava is this Kripa Sindhubhya, ocean of mercy. He's like a desire tree, will fulfill all the desires. Vancha kalpa tribhyascha. So this is where fulfilling tree in the spiritual world. They have a tree. Prabhupada explains it. In the material world, a tree can supply only the fruit that it can provide. You don't go to an apple tree and expect to get a banana. Not in this country anyway. And even if you were to go to an apple tree and get apples, you can only get the amount of apples. Like in Krunabhavan, we got quite a few, so maybe some of these trees are turning into kalpavriksha trees. So much so, it's a problem if you don't get enough food, and then it's a problem if you get too much. Always problems in this world. But you go to a wish-fulfilling tree, and you can get any amount of fruit, or any variety of fruit. It's not like, okay, that's it, done. Need to wait till next season when I get some more fruits. If the devotees are falling asleep, it's easier to stand up than fight it, because it's easier to stay awake. And then if you fall over, then you really should go to bed. We had one devotee who was he was accustomed to sleeping 12 hours a day. And when he joined the back to program, no matter what he did, even standing up, he would just fall over into all the assembly of devotees. So eventually they had to let him sleep like 10, 12 hours a day because he couldn't function. But even if we have that conditioning, maybe if we have to sleep more, then we should sleep more. But try to reduce it. So he's the Vaishnava. So he's a Paradukha Dukhi. So what does Paradukha Dukhi mean? You're answering all the questions today. Almost all. So he's distressed. Dukhi means misery. Paradukha Dukhi, that his Dukhi is he's compassionate. That's and that's a great quality. That he's unhappy to see others suffering, and they're suffering because what's the cause of all suffering? Begins with I. Not Ishan, no. Ignorance, did you say? Ignorance, yeah, exactly. So the Vaishnava, he sees people are suffering because of ignorance. They don't have to suffer. Just like they may see somebody doing some horrible activity and they feel sorry for that activity, just like someone's killing an animal. And they think that poor animal, but also the poor person who's doing it, they don't realize that they're going to be on the receiving end next time. So that is his motivating factor, is that he doesn't want to see the living entity suffer. So therefore, he wants to give this knowledge, because the cure for ignorance is knowledge, isn't it? So even though we haven't had personal association of Srila Prabhupada, or we may have had association of our spiritual master and he may have gone, or we may have our spiritual master, but we don't always see the spiritual master. So this is called Vipralamba Seva, that we're serving in separation. And Lord Chaitanya taught this as the highest principle, that service, just like, was it Panchapu was given class yesterday, no, the day before, recently. And he was saying that, and I've seen it myself, is that when the spiritual master comes to the temple, then all disciples show up, and they're all on their best behavior. And oh, yes, Guru Maharaj, as if they're always there every day doing service. And then when he goes, then they disappear again until the next time he comes back. So that type of devotee is a certain type, and they're operating on their level of faith. No, that's not a criticism, but the better thing is that when Guru Maharaj is gone, we still continue to serve as if he was there watching us. Sometimes we used to do that in Sankirtan. If you were struggling, you just think, well, what if your spiritual master was standing watching you? Would you be so morose? Would you be so lethargic? Would you be catching 40 winks in the van before you hit the street? If your spiritual master, if you woke up and you seen your spiritual master sitting next to you, you'd be like, oh, what am I doing? You'd go, oh, sorry, Guru Maharaj, wasting your time. Because when we take shelter with the spiritual master, it's his time. It's his time. He's under our care. And or sometimes we might think, well, if the Supreme Lord was watching me at this time, and he is, and he's within the heart, he's watching us, and he's also within the heart of your spiritual master. It's not the spiritual masters that aware of every disciple's every move at all times, but it can be. In Krishna, we may inspire him to say the right thing to help particular individual souls. So there's a story with this, with regarding compassion here. Srila Prabhupada tells it on the disappearance day of his spiritual master. He tells the story. Sadhavo Jiva Va Marava. There was a nice story the other day I told you that a sage is giving different kinds of blessings to different types of persons. So to a king's son, a prince, he blessed Rajaputra Chiram Jiva. You're a king's son, a prince, you live forever. And a Muni Putra, the son of a saintly person, he blessed him, Majiva, Majiva. You don't live. You think that's a strange blessing, but we'll come and explain it in a minute. Rajaputra Chira Muni Putra Majiva. And Sadhu devotees, he blessed him, Jiva Va Marava. Either you live or die, as you like. And there was a butcher, he blessed him, Majiva Mamara. You don't die and don't live. So these words are very significant that I've already explained. Still, I'm explaining. A prince, he's enjoying sense gratification, that's all. He has got enough facility for sense enjoyment, so his next life is hellish, because if you indulge in sex life, then Krishna will give you facility to have sex life 3 times in an hour, just like the pigeons, the monkeys, the sparrows. They're very sexually strong. You've seen it. So the facility is given. So princely order, thereafter sense enjoyment. So he's blessed that better you live forever, because after your death you do not know what is going to happen to you. You're going to get a hellish life. Better you live for some time, go on with your enjoyment. And Muniputra Majiva, Brahmachari, working under the guidance, under strict disciplinary guidance of his spiritual master, he is blessed. Majiva, you better die, because you're so trained to enter into the kingdom of God. Why should you take so much trouble? Better you die and go back to Godhead. So that would mean, like, before you get entangled in the material world, you're already separated from it. Majiva, and the devotee he blessed, Jivava Marova. My dear devotee, either you live or die, the same thing. So this is there, the devotee's life, the devotee's death, devotee's appearance, disappearance. They're always serving Krishna. It doesn't matter whether they live or whether they die. If they're going to be serving, they'll be serving in this body, in this plane, or they'll be serving in another situation. So this is why it's important that we're attentive to hearing about Krishna, so that our consciousness is aligned in Krishna consciousness. We're engaging our mind and senses 24 hours a day. Now, 24 hours a day doesn't mean to say that we're slaves, but it means that we're re-establishing our eternal constitutional position. Even in our sleep, if we're so much meditating on Krishna, so meditating on Krishna doesn't mean to say we can't clean the temple room because we're so busy meditating on Krishna. We're trying to clean it, but we can't, because we're just like, I'm trying to chant and meditate on Krishna's pastimes, and I can't because I'm getting distracted from cleaning. No, the service is a meditation. Seva Samadhi, it's called. Seva Samadhi. Just remember, it's connected to Krishna. It's connected by the fact that someone's given you that service. That's connected. And to the butcher, he blessed them. Don't live, don't die. What he's to do, his living condition is so abominable. From the morning he has to slaughter so many animals, see the blood stain, the ghastly scene. That is his livelihood. So what a horrible life this is. So don't live and don't die also, because after death, he's going to be in so much hellish condition nobody can describe. So both lives, living condition and death. After death, his condition is very horrible. So and this is the just what we're talking about there is the devotee's paradukha dukhi. When he sees this situation, then he feels very sorry for that person, and he wants to somehow or another benedict him. So just like sometimes on Sankirtan, we would go into the butcher's shop and we would take money from them and use it in Krishna's service. We'd get donations. I remember in Dundee, I went into a slaughterhouse because I really didn't want to go in, but I thought, what chance have they got? And I went to the reception. You know, if the devotee doesn't go there and put aside their own self-comforting and take the risks to save these people, then who's going to save them? Of course, we have to make sure that it's not going to contaminate our consciousness to the point where our Krishna consciousness is going to get disturbed. But when you take these risks, you get the Lord's protection. So I went to the reception, and the person there behind a glass door opened up, gave some donation, And I said, what about the workers? Can I go and ask the workers? And in my mind, I was hoping she'd say no. She said, actually, yeah, they're just on their break. They're in the locker room. And I thought, oh, good, at least I don't have to walk into the shop floor, because I couldn't manage to do that. So I went in, and there's blood everywhere, and they're putting their hands in their pockets, and there's blood in the money. And it was kind of revolting, but I thought, this is their only hope, that we take that and we use it in Krishna's service. We print some books. I tried to give out some books. It wasn't higher tastes that day, unfortunately. But there was another occasion where unbeknowingly, I was distributing higher tastes outside the butcher shop. I wasn't doing it on purpose, but the guy came out and says, "You're driving my customers away. Can you move along?" I said, "Oh, sorry, I didn't realise that." So this is why we go out. Lord Chaitanya, he would have kirtans with his devotees. Nagar kirtan, they'd be behind locked doors in the middle of the night, and they were experiencing great ecstasy. But finally, Lord Chaitanya stopped one night and he says, "This is not why I came. I didn't come to have kirtan in secret. I came here to spread the holy names in every town and village. Harinam, 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 Evikevalam, Kalo, Nishcheva, Nishcheva, Gatir, and Yata." So then he started taking the chanting parties out to the street. And then, of course, the Hare Krishna movement spread. And Srila Prabhupada, the wonderful pure devotee of the Lord, came and did the same thing. He went to, first of all, he went to the Uptowns area of New York, but he realized nothing's happening here. Just a few people doing some Mayavadi philosophy and some yoga exercises, but nobody was really sincerely looking to follow that message. So he went to the Bowery, which is considered to be basically like the slums of New York at that time. Maybe it's experienced some renovation since then, but at that time, basically, it was the pits, so to speak. Devotees will tell you at that time. And Prabhupada went there, and he went under a tree, Tompkins Square Park, and chanted Hare Krishna under the faith of his Guru Maharaj, and the whole movement spread. And similarly, under the faith of Prabhupada and Prabhupada's disciples, our spiritual masters, then we're carrying on this mission, and therefore there'll be no break. So the devotee spends his time in his life spreading the holy name around. And then Mamupetya Punarjanma Dukalayama Shashvatam Napnuvanti Mahatmana Sam Siddhim Paramam Gatim. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world which is full of miseries because they have attained the highest perfection. So Krishna's reinforcing this, Janma Karma Chame Divyam, that we'd never come back to this material world again. Unless, of course, by the Lord's request. And that abode, the pure devotee has come to let us know what that abode is about. So here in Bhagavad Gita, Natad Basayate Suryo Na Shashanko Na Pavaka Yad Gatvana Nivartante Taddam Paramam Mama. That supreme abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. So Prabhupada also mentions here, so spiritual appearance and disappearance, there's no difference, just like in material point of view. If a person takes birth, suppose you get a son born, you become very happy. The same son, when passes away, you become very unhappy. This is material. And spiritually, there's no such difference, appearance or disappearance. So although this is a disappearance day of Om Vishnupad Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, so there's nothing to be lamented. Although we feel separation, that feeling is there, but spiritually there's no difference between appearance and disappearance. There's a song, Narottam Das Thakur's song, Ye Anilo Premadana. Do you know? Any one of you know? Can you sing? So we know the song, Ye Anilo Premadana Koruna Prachur Hino Prabha Pubikota Gela Acharya Thakur. And Lord Chaitanya, he expressed his desire, Pritiviti Achiyati Nagaradi Grama Sarvatra Prachar Haibi Moranama. He predicted all over the world, as many towns and villages are there, everywhere my name will be known. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's name. which is now attempted. It is actually being actually to execute this will of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He said personally, Bharata Bhumiti Manusya Janma Hoilo Yar Janma Sataka Kari Kara Para Upakar. He wanted that his name should be broadcast all over the world in every town and village. And who would do it? That he asked anyone who's taking birth in Bharat Varsh, India, it is his duty, first of all, make himself perfect by understanding the philosophy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then broadcast it, distribute it. This was the very duty of every Indian. So, of course, it's not just every Indian. Because we've heard about this, then it's our duty as well. Because even nowadays, the Indians are coming to the Westerners to find out about Krishna consciousness. We're finding that. And that's not because we're better in some way, it's because we just happen to get in the door before them and read Prabhupada's books and learn about it first. And sometimes it's the other way around as well. So regardless of where we're from, when we hear this message, then it immediately becomes our sacred duty to carry that message on. Now, Lord Chaitanya, he wasn't some kind of historical person that wanted his name to be continued after his death. Like sometimes people want a monument built so they're remembered, like in Glasgow Green, you can go and you see there's a Nelson's monument, and in Trafalgar Square you see Nelson's column. And there's probably so many other people who were very important at that time, but we don't know anything about them. So it's not like that. But Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Lord, and even the Supreme Lord, his mission is to spread the holy name. So when Prabhupada first arrived in the West, then he wrote a prayer, and in that prayer he wrote, the holy name of Lord Gauranga will be heard in every town and village. So he took that. Adhoksha was pointing out a nice thing the other day, that sometimes in between Prabhupada, when you hear morning walks, in between the conversations, you hear him just before he starts chatting, you go, Harinama, Harinama. So he's always establishing that as his mission. He never gave that up. So that is also how we align ourselves, that whatever we're doing, we have to see it in relation to this mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And whatever we've learned, whatever we've gained from Krishna consciousness, then we should try to bear that in mind and don't become apathetic and always remain grateful. So that takes some endeavour. And in this way, we can actually reciprocate with the orders of the spiritual master. So we'll just stop if anyone's got any questions or comments. Yes.
Just thinking about what you said about, if we should imagine that Oh, thank you. And I was thinking, this made me think that I should ask myself more the question, what would I do? Would I do this if they were here? But I was also wondering, how can if we're doing service, then how can we remember that and remember Krishna more? Because it can be really easy to for us to just do service and just be okay, I'm not even do it for Krishna, but just to get things done. Yeah. So how can we then just do it for Krishna and remember Krishna while we're doing the service?
Well, you're actually doing it just now. You're sitting in Bhagavatam class, so when we come in the association of devotees and we chat together and we hear together, we're reminding each other the purpose of what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. Another thing you can do is, a practical thing is, before we start our service, we can pay our obeisances to a spiritual master. We don't necessarily have to go on the ground and do it, but we can offer our prayers. Every day before starting Sankirtan, I would say the pranams to Srila Prabhupada, etc., and Lord Chaitanya. And I'd ask their permission to do this service nicely for their pleasure. And to remember why we're doing it, before we start it, if we're getting ourselves in this situation where we're just thinking it's mundane, we're trying to cram it all in, there's not too little time, then we're kind of losing sight of why we're doing it. So we just have to kind of bring that back in again. So therefore, attending the morning program and hearing an association of devotees, that keeps that memory revived. and asking questions like that. So some practical things we can do is just consider how it's related. So for example, say you're cutting up potatoes and there may have been a good harvest and you think, oh, that Ishan, I wish he wouldn't grow so many potatoes. Why do I have to cut so many? Wouldn't matter if you grew them anyway. You've got to feed the same amount of people. But you're thinking, well, what's going to happen with the potato? That's going to get taken to the kitchen. A devotee's going to. So we can think a devotee either grew that, or they went to Sanktan, got the money, and money paid for that, and so that can be offered to the Lord. Somebody's going to cook it. Someone's going to offer it. Someone's going to serve it out, and someone's going to respect it. So when you're cutting that potato, the whole meditation might be there, and that keeps you. Same as cleaning the temple. Why we clean the temple? Because it's the Lord's living room. He's living in here. You know, we keep our own room tidy, don't we? Or even if we don't, then we should at least keep the Lord. So I must say that sometimes when the devotees hear some of the Sankirtan scores that we used to do, they think, oh, that was amazing, how do you manage it? But we were actually thinking that was a space out. Because the more you get into your service, the more you can see there's much more room for improvement. If you take the pastime of Gunducha Marjanam and the cleansing of the Gunducha temple, so Lord Chaitanya was heading up that pastime, the cleansing of the temple, and everyone thought they'd cleaned it. And Lord Chaitanya's mood was, we haven't even started. So there's so much more dirt came out after that. So this is showing us just when we think we're doing our best, are we doing enough? We may be doing our best at this point in time, but it doesn't mean to say that that's the end of the story. We're doing the best according to our particular condition at that time, but as we keep serving, our consciousness becomes more pure, we become more aware of how to utilise our time much better. So we don't want to be placing limitations on our ability to do unmotivated and uninterrupted service. If we just keep on placing limitations on it, then that's what we stop with. Of course, there's a limit to what the body can do, and you know, if we get so tired that we can't do our service, then that becomes ineffective. So we have to make sure that we balance it with proper eating, sleeping, and stuff like that. You know, make sure that we don't cheat on our sadhana, otherwise we will forget why we're doing things. If we're just chanting the japa mechanically and we're not really listening to it, then in due course of time, if we're not careful, we might stop chanting, or we might forget why we're chanting. We're chanting asking for service, and then service comes along. Anyone else like to add anything to that, or share anything or other questions? You should.
We're thinking so much about, we can organize.
That might be there, but then before and after, if it's getting to the point where it becomes too much of a burden and we don't see the connection, then we have to remind ourselves of what that connection is. And sometimes, especially for those who are managing and organising, I remember speaking with Pragosh. He just organised 2 Rath Yatra festivals. And I says, how was it? He says, well, everybody enjoyed it. And I said, well, except for you. I said, you. He says, well, it was good once it was over. And that's often the case, when you're organising a big festival, then you're taking on that anxiety to provide facility for so many people to come and be Krishna conscious. And this is very pleasing to Lord Chaitanya when we take on anxiety for the fallen conditioned souls, because he's always in anxiety for their well-being. So when we take on some anxiety for their well-being, we're relieving the anxiety of Lord Chaitanya. We're taking it off of his hands. And then he becomes so attracted by that. But at the same time, we shouldn't lose ourselves in it. We have to keep good connection there. So quite often what happens is when it's all over, then you can enjoy, yeah, okay, now it's done. Now I'm happy. Okay, that retreat's over. That was such an effort, but now... and I've found myself in the situation like when we did Festival of Colours, a couple of times I've said, never again. And then even when I said never again, I thought, even when it's all over and I'm feeling happy, I'm still never again. But then it's not, okay, we'll do it again. Immediately someone says, oh, what's next year's date? It's like, no, don't ask. But when you see people happy and it's all over and it was successful, a lot of people got prasadam, they got the holy name, they took books, they made some connection, then it's worth it. Unfortunately, it's always worth it.
I'm just wondering, like, you're talking about the need to not neglect your sadhana so that you still remember Krishna, but then there's a chance sadhana becomes, is the sadhana the goal in itself, or is sadhana simply to allow us to do service, or is a service to actually, because you also hear that good service makes you chant better. So it's not, I feel it's maybe a little bit, I can't quite work out if...
All true. All of the above is true. So the sadhana, Prabhupada explains that the sadhana is the means by which we attain something. So what we're doing as a sadhana is the means by which we can attain pure love of God. But it's also the activities will continue when we do achieve that love of God. I think it was Narottam Das Thakur says that even when I become fully liberated, I still won't give up my sadhana. And we see great devotees like Sanatana Goswami, even when he was very old, he would still try to walk 14 miles to Govardhan and then 14 miles round Govardhan and 14 miles back. This was his daily sadhana. He was making such, basically it's his whole day was doing that sadhana till the point when the Lord appeared to him and said, okay, now you're an old man, don't do this any longer. He becomes so dear to the Lord that the Lord comes and says, okay, too much sadhana. Even in Haridas Thakur, he was chanting 3 times 64 rounds a day. So that leaves you an hour to do everything else. And at one point he was unhappy, and Lord Chaitanya says, why are you unhappy? He says, I cannot complete my prescribed rounds today. He says, you don't have to. You're beyond that. But still, the safest path is always to stick to your sadhana. I don't think we've got so advanced that now I don't have to do the sadhana, or have too much service or too much preaching to do that, I can neglect my sadhana. Sometimes devotees do that, but it's not recommended. And one time we did some successful festival in the Scottish Exhibition Centre, and we made quite a bit of Lakshmi, sold books, got a lot of people chanting, did loads of prasadam. And Shiva Ramaraj asked me how was my own sadhana, and I said, well, I kind of fell behind on my rounds doing that. He says, well, what's the point of doing this? You're not doing it, and you're asking them to do it. So to me, that meant devotee care. It's like, look after the devotees who are here first before we go anywhere else. So we shouldn't be sacrificing our own vows or our own sadhana in the name of so-called preaching. Therefore, it's important that we become very regulated, get our rounds done in the morning, get our reading done, so that the rest of the day we can just dedicate to the preaching, to the service related to the preaching. And the other part of the question was the latter part. Yeah, so first you were saying about sadhana. Oh yeah, so the chanting is asking for service, and the service is there to make us humble so that we can chant nicer. And this way it's complementary the whole time. Every day we're chanting, please engage me in service, and the Lord gives you some service. And sometimes that service may be that you're going to have to put aside your self-comforting, or put aside your false ego, or we may, like Prabhupada said, we have to surrender. Surrender means sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do, and sometimes we don't get to do things we want to do. But this is how we get closer to Krishna. If we just do what we want to do, then really it's not on the higher level of devotion service. Maybe to begin with, we have to get people to do things that are attracted to them, but we have to progress to the point where Prabhupada says that a devotee is equally enthusiastic about any service they're given because it's service. We might not be equally, efficient or proficient, but we equally give it a try. Just like that devotee who was told to read Bhagavad Gita by his spiritual master, but he couldn't read. He still got the result because he tried. Then he got love of God. So when we're chanting in a humble state of mind, Trinadapisanatina, or we're trying to, then the service is given us opportunity where we have to interact with so many other devotees who are trying to be devotees. We're trying to be devoted, they're trying to be devotees, and sometimes sparks will fly, sometimes may fall out or fall in. But the thing is, that verse, Trinadapi, that's our meditation throughout the day. We're thinking we have to tolerate, but people are having to tolerate us as well, isn't it? Anybody here doesn't have to be tolerated. Okay, we could talk a lot more, but we should stop now. Of course, it's fasting until midday. So, huh? Yeah, so we'll carry on class for the next 3 hours. Actually, I don't know about anyone else, but I've got some things to do. So if there's nothing else, we'll stop there. Thank you very much. And we'll meet back here again at 5 o'clock, where we will continue to speak about Srila Prabhupada, and we'll ask the devotees if we can try to remember something which strikes them or inspires them or has inspired them that Srila Prabhupada has said or did, or that they've read. Also, we'll sing this Jaya Nilo Premadana, which is often sung in the disappearance of the devotees. And we'll share some of Prabhupada's pastimes and that final pastime of leaving, showing devotees how to leave this world and go back to Godhead. ISKCON Govinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada Jagat Guru ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande.